Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. See some more people trickling in. Just going to give it another moment. Okay. Well, good morning, and thank you for joining us for this virtual briefing on 2 opportunities to expand access to refundable tax credits in FY 2027. My name is Charlotte Bruce, and I'm the Director of Policy for Children's Health Watch, a pediatric research and policy network based at Boston Medical Center that leads the Healthy Families Tax Credits Coalition, a statewide network of more than 80 organizations working to strengthen tax credits and free tax prep services to deliver more money back into the pockets of your constituents. Today, you will learn about 2 opportunities to do this in the FY27 budget. First, by restoring $1.5 million in earmark funding for the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, or VITA, which provides free tax prep services to families with low and moderate incomes. And second, to expand eligibility for the Earned Income Tax Credit to immigrant workers who are currently excluded. So to kick things off this morning, before we go through our agenda and some more details on each of these priorities, I'd love to welcome 2 legislators who have been amazing champions of tax credits and policies to improve access. And first, I'm going to pass things over to Representative Mindy Domb. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much. I'm Mindy Domb. I'm the state rep for the 3rd Hampshire District, which includes the town of Amherst and half of the town of Granby. And I just have a few things to say. First of all, I really want to thank all the offices for coming to this briefing. This is really an opportunity to learn about how we can get more money back into the households and pockets of Massachusetts residents who will then spend it on our local economies and support our communities. Tax credits are terrific. But they can be very complicated to access. And so nearly 20% of people who are eligible have not even accessed them in the past. So I want you to think about 2 important numbers as we go through this, and you'll learn a lot about how these tax credits benefit people. Think about 20 and 60 and 1.5 million. So what's 20? Nearly 20% of eligible residents don't claim the EITC. That means they're not claiming money that's due to them, primarily because the process is so complicated. Then I want you to think about that 1.5 million. That 1.5 million restores the VITA program so that it can support those people to, in fact, process those claims and get that money back into their hands and into our local communities. So why do it? Because the return of investment is so great. That's where that 60 number comes in. The return on investment to VITA is 60 to 1. That means every time a person gets $1 back, $1 spent, they get $60 back. That's a phenomenal investment in our people and in our communities. I really want to thank the representatives' offices who are here today. Line item 1201-0100, which you'll hear a lot about in today's briefing, restores the voluntary tax preparation program to $1.5 million, what it needs to be able to serve Massachusetts residents and help them get the money that they're eligible for, that they have earned, that they deserve, and also bring that money back into our local communities. As we face this incredible affordability crisis, which existed, quite frankly, before the war in the Middle East and is only going to get more intense with the war that's happening in the Middle East. We need to make sure that we're working hard to bring every dollar back to Massachusetts. This program does that. It succeeds at it, but it needs our support to be able to hire the administration, the folks, to be able to go out there, make outreach, connect with people, and get them the funds they deserve. So thank you so much to all of you for showing up, for expressing interest. You'll be hearing from us because we will be looking to restore that line item as a key critical component to Massachusetts' response to the affordability crisis. Again, that's line item 1201-0100 in the budget. We're going to be looking to restore it to $1.5 million so we can bring back money to Massachusetts households. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Domb. Really appreciate your partnership on this, and I know you have to jump to a committee meeting, so thank you for taking the time and being such a champ on tax credits.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. So again, thank you all for taking the time to join us. Going to run through a quick briefing agenda, and we'll have some champions, some legislative champions hop on in between to offer some additional remarks. But just to give you an overview of what we're going to be speaking about today is first just level setting about the refundable tax credits, specifically the earned income tax credit and child and family tax credit, how they work to put money back into constituents' pockets. I know many of you are familiar with these credits. Many of your bosses or yourself have supported these in both co-sponsoring legislation and in past budget priorities, but just re-emphasizing the impact that these credits have and really the way that they're affordability credits in many ways. Second, we're going to describe major barriers, so the cuts to free tax preparation services that limit access to these credits, and then also an exclusion within the earned income tax credit of immigrant and mixed status taxpayers. And then describe the ways that you and your office can improve access to those through this budget cycle. So what are refundable tax credits? Refundable tax credits reduce the amount of taxes a family owes and provides a refund if that credit is more than what they owe in tax credits. So especially for families with low and moderate incomes who don't owe a lot of taxes, this is just a check back into their pockets. And this can be hundreds and thousands of dollars, particularly when you're combining state and federal credits. Tax credits, refundable tax credits, are actually a huge part of the social safety net. We don't typically think about them as such, but they, beyond Social Security, are the biggest anti-poverty tool in the country. And so it really is a critical piece of the safety net, again, providing direct, flexible cash back to families, which they can use however they see fit for their family, for their needs, for their children, and really supporting the cost of living, especially important right now when we all know that cost of living just continues to go up. Massachusetts has been a major leader on refundable tax credits. So the earned income tax credit and child tax credit are two at the federal level that provide a huge anti-poverty benefit and deliver money back to families' pockets. Massachusetts has enacted their own state versions, which help to boost what that return is to families. Put a bit of a number on that. So how much money are we talking about? In Massachusetts, our earned income tax credit matches 40% of the federal, which is an average credit of just about $1,000. So again, really meaningful money. This is available for families who earned below $69,000, and what you are able to access depends on your family size, how much you make, but again, a really significant amount of money. The newer credit, which some of you may be familiar with, that the legislature passed last session, is a child and family tax credit of $440 per child under the age of 13. And uniquely, our Massachusetts child tax credit also supports other dependents, so disabled dependents, spouse who may need care, or some other older dependents. And so that's a really critical and unique aspect of the Massachusetts credit and the work we're doing. I will note that the child and family tax credit is immigrant inclusive. So where you'll hear today about how this is a big aspect of the earned income tax credit that we see as lacking, we do already have this eligibility in our child and family tax credit. So just an ability and a desire to create parity between our state tax credits so that more families can claim them. Next slide. So as I mentioned last session, the legislature really focused on these credits as a way to deliver relief to families. And so we now offer in Massachusetts a bigger earned income tax credit. So we now match, as I said, 40% of the federal credit. And we also offer this new child and family tax credit. So want to just say a huge thank you to everybody who was involved in that, for your bosses who have supported this. We know it's really meaningful for constituents and families across the country to access this flexible dollars. And so what we're doing here today is, again, this is a budget briefing focused on ways to improve access this budget. And so the two pieces that we see as really opportunities to improve is, one, ensuring families know about and can access these credits. As Representative Domb mentioned, a lot of families may be missing out because they may not know that they're eligible, and they may not have a tax filing obligation, so they don't file. And so VITA, the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, is really critical in making sure families are connected to these credits. But unfortunately, over the past several budgets, funding has been cut, which has really reduced and limited their capacity to help families across the state. The second priority that we're focusing on this briefing and this budget is extending the earned income tax credit to working immigrants who file taxes using an individual taxpayer ID number instead of a social. So again, a really big priority of ours to improve the equity of the credits and making sure that all of our families are able to access this equitably. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to some of our speakers. And we're going to start with Joe Diamond, who is the Executive Director of MassCap and is going to be speaking about the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program.
Thanks, Charlotte. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, very good. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here. I work with 23 community action agencies in Massachusetts that make up MassCap, and it's my pleasure to provide some information, some detailed information about voluntary income tax assistance sites and how they work. Certainly, some context is really important. First, I want to thank our partners together with us. That is the Boston Tax Help Coalition. I see Brian Robinson is joined, along with Kobe Naim, who works with MassCap. Together, the two coalitions, MassCap and the Boston Tax Help Coalition, run 80 VITA sites across the state. And I want to say that I so appreciate Representative Domb's remarks because she really did get to the heart of the matter, and we so appreciate her being the champion. The top line, of course, is that we are respectfully recommending that this resource be restored in line item 1201-0100 to 1.5 million. Its level in FY23 and 24. It is such a critical resource. It's in some sense a modest request with huge returns. The story of poverty in a large sense is the story of low wages. This approach combined access through the infrastructure that the VITA sites represent to the tax credits that Charlotte was talking about is a way of addressing this wage gap and, as the representative noted, the affordability crisis. It's also a way for us to, as Charlotte also mentioned, to maximize the tax credits that have been developed here in Massachusetts, the increase in the earned income tax credit, to maximize those, to help people access those. These are nation-leading policies. We want to make sure that we can continue to help people maximize those tax credits. Further, it's so important to strengthen VITA sites because other avenues to access these credits aren't available. For example, direct file no longer is available to the people that we work with. As we know, the earned income tax credit and other tax credits encourage work. The aspect of this that we want to focus on is the fact that the support from the state and the federal government is important for the capacity of this access infrastructure, if you will. So more about VITA sites. People that we serve often work 1, 2, or even 3 jobs. They can access the tax credits that you see, the EITC, the Child and Family Tax Credit. And the important thing to note is that the resources that come in act as, if you will, mini stimulus packages for local communities. Folks who are able to access these tax credits can pay bills, cover essential expenses, emergency needs, food, clothing, shelter. Oftentimes, folks fix vehicles, all of which is so important to being able to work and in some sense to reward work. Also, an important aspect of this is we work with folks to make sure that they can save and plan for a hopeful future. How do VITA sites work? Folks on the line can talk about this too, but very straightforwardly, VITA sites require coordination so that the volunteers can be as effective as possible. Folks typically go through an intake, then scheduled for an appointment. The taxes are prepared, and the quality of those taxes is checked. We have a very high, if not perfect, approach to quality in terms of the returns that we file. In any given year, about 30,000 folks are served across these 80 VITA sites, and One critical feature of VITA sites that are often at multi-service centers is that people have not only access to financial literacy, but also to other services that are available there because of a service integration approach, including Head Start. Next slide, please. Representative Domb talked about the return on investment, and it is so important. Again, the resource that we're asking for is $1.5 million, but what that yields is really incredible. When you think about the resource that folks use, that agencies use, that VITA sites use to cover the cost, and you set that against what comes back to the community, the return on investment can be about 60 to 1. There are savings that people realize on top of the tax credits. Folks do not go to pay tax preparers, and so across the system, if you will, folks save about $9 million. You can see that the average payout for the state AITC is about $2,400, but overall people can access over $8,000, and that itself in tax credits, and that itself it can be life-changing. Economists tell us that for every dollar spent from this activity yields about $1.44 in sort of activity or ripple effect, and the cost per client is about $30. Next slide, please. VITA sites are powered by volunteers. Volunteers are the heart and soul of VITA sites, and it's a really critical feature because it really is one way of how we match the investment that state and federal resources represent. Volunteers are IRS certified. They are students. They are folks who work at banks, folks in the community. They are people who are certified public accountants and others, and they work one-on-one. They donate their time and expertise. The numbers you see here in terms of the number of volunteers, the number of volunteer hours, and the donated tax prep services are probably going to be a little less this year because of the limited capacity that has resulted from the reduction in the line item. And we'll go over that in a moment in terms of how much has been reduced by about 60% over the course of 2 years. But these numbers themselves represent a framework for how volunteers support the system. We estimate that the average hourly rate, given the range of folks who volunteer, is about $50 per hour. And when you apply that to the number of volunteers in this example and 40,000 volunteer hours, you get about $2 million in donated tax prep services. Our estimates for this year are less than that because of the fact that we've not been able to sustain as many volunteers. But the overall point is that the number of donated hours, or the value of the donated hours, really does match what we are asking for. So that, combined with the return on investment, I think is a powerful, if you will, return to the Commonwealth. Next slide, please. And you can see from this slide the partial funding history for voluntary income tax assistance. It's important to note that for FY20, there was an investment of $200,000 for voluntary tax assistance. And that was due to the conversations and advocacy of the folks on the line and others with legislators to point out some of the key features that I'm pointing out now. And that resource actually grew by FY23 to 1.5 million and remained there basically in FY24, but has been reduced significantly since then. The motivation and the rationale for the resource being introduced in 2020 and then increased remains the same, that it is a resource that is used so well and so efficiently, and it matches in some sense the federal resource, and is something that's critical for the ability of this network to maximize, as I said before, to maximize the investment that the state has made in the tax credits. You see the figure at the bottom of the chart of 250,000, and that's what the governor has proposed in her budget. So it's been reduced by about 60%, and that has had an impact on the capacity across the 80 Vita sites. The network itself became more stable when the resource was increased. But prior to the investment by the state, the network was unstable. Vita sites would go off and online, and that's beginning to happen again. And so that raises significant concern. Next slide, please. Tax credits are transformational, and Vita sites help make them accessible. Now, let me just note a couple of success stories that I think are so important, bringing this down to the level of our neighbors and our friends and us. Carly is a volunteer. Carly Ramel is our leads this coalition, but she's also a volunteer, and in her work as a volunteer tax preparer, she's working with a single mother who, because of an inadvertent mistake in terms of filing as a single person or as a parent, Carly has helped her to realize that she's entitled to tax credits that would go back a few years and significant resources. So this is just an example of how volunteers can be so influential and so helpful, and also an example of how somebody's life can be changed by a good interaction with a volunteer, a trained, certified volunteer. I also just want to read as I close one other example, and it's related to a family in Lynn and working with an agency, a community action agency in Lynn called Leo. After being referred to Leo, they began working with Leo's financial empowerment specialist to get caught up after filing 6 years of tax returns. Giovanni and Brianna were able to access the earned income tax credit, the child tax credit, as well as refunds for prior overpayments from years of work. In total, the family will receive enough in refunds to enable them to find housing and exit emergency shelter. They continue working with Leo on their path to long-term financial stability, and they say, "We could not file our taxes in the same degree if not for the generous services Leo provided. The benefits to having them in this community cannot be overstated." Thank you very much. I'm sure there might be time for questions later. Oops, Charlotte, can't hear you.
You hear me?
Now,
That's
yeah.
good. Okay, thank you. I appreciate the overview, Joe. And thank you for explaining all the work that Vita does to connect families to these great tax credits. We're gonna pause our presentation now and welcome Senator Eldridge. Thank you for joining us. Senator Eldridge has been a massive champion on tax credits since our coalition launched, and so just want to recognize you and appreciate you for joining this budget briefing. I'm going to turn it over to you for some brief remarks around the tax credits and opportunities to improve access to this budget.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. Really appreciate it. And my apologies on being a few minutes late. I know Representative Domb spoke, and great to get the update from Joe. And thank you, Charlotte, for leading the Healthy Families Tax Credit Coalition. So, I think what's already been presented is what I would echo is I've been very proud to be one of the lead Senate sponsors on expanding the EITC over the past 10 years. It's just been an incredible expansion, an incredible coalition effort. And just as important, obviously, to make sure that families can access the EITC is the VITA program. So very committed to restoring the $1.5 million line item. That's really important to help families that often might not be as aware about these different tax credits, and just want to give a special thank you to the whole coalition and you, Charlotte, because last session, of course, when the discussion around so-called tax reform came up, I'm so proud that a key part of that tax package was not just expanding the EITC to 40%, but creating a child credit, and of course bringing up the conversation about making sure that all families can access the EITC. And that's why this session proud to file the legislation that, not only is trying to get the EITC match up further, but to make sure our immigrant families, especially those that are mixed status or who are undocumented but who are paying taxes, can access this EITC. I'm sure I don't have to tell anyone here in this gathering that immigrant families are more vulnerable than ever, and unfortunately often even more financially unstable. So thanks so much for having me. My apologies on being late, and I will be advocating for these items in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate your longtime championship and jumping on. I know it's a busy week for everybody. I'm going to, great, thanks for pulling those slides back up. We're now going to turn it over to our friends at Greater Boston Legal Services to describe the second piece of our budget priorities, extending the earned income tax credit to immigrant tax filers. Thank you.
Good morning. Before I get to our topic about immigrant access to certain tax credits, I just wanted to echo what has already been said about VITA and add a little piece to it. So tax credits, address affordability and the wage gap, just like Joe said. They're a recognition that hard work leaves people sometimes still struggling. And they're only as good as access and delivery. And VITA addresses both of those things, access and delivery. And there was a recent, just a couple of days ago, Washington Post article that was very interesting because it's talking about accuracy in tax returns. Over half Americans use paid tax preparers, and there are no requirements for credentials for those preparers. You need a license to cut hair. You don't to do people's taxes and charge for it. VITA, on the other hand, trains its volunteers and has a consistently over, I think it's 96% accuracy rate. I work with Luis Arevalo at the tax clinic in Greater Boston Legal Services, and we are also an IRS sponsored organization that helps people not necessarily with the tax preparation, but when people have problems. And we see those problems with the private tax preparers who cause, by and large, low and moderate income folks to end up with huge penalties. So I would really urge you to look at that article, and it's based on a GAO and a Center for Taxpayer Rights study where they saw the problems facing taxpayers who cannot get high quality tax preparation. Okay, so on to our topic about immigrant taxpayers. So VITA addresses structural barriers, but we've got some legal barriers here to people who are income eligible but are not getting the same tax credits. And these are anti-poverty tax credits. They transform lives, like was just said, and hopefully get people and households to the next level where they don't have the income that would qualify them for these tax credits. Number one to understand is immigrants are tax filers regardless of their immigration status. So you have this same tax filing obligation whether you've got a social security number or whether you've got an you don't, and you can get an IRS issued individual taxpayer identification number or an ITIN that will allow you to comply with your tax filing obligations, but does not give you access to the same tax credits. Now, there has been some momentum, especially since COVID, among states to change this, at least at the state level. We're not going to change it at the federal level right now, but we can do something about the Massachusetts earned income tax credit. And when I do a longer presentation, I've got a slide with like two families, and one has one ITIN filer, and maybe mom has a social security number, dad has the ITIN, they've got US citizen kids, say they've got $38,000 in income, they're going to get zero and have a debt. Whereas the family where both mom and dad have social security numbers will get thousands of dollars in a cash refund. And it's hard to understate how important those cash refunds are. Just this morning, I was grabbing coffee, and a new attorney in our housing unit was asking me what unit I'm in, and she's come from California, where her organization was associated with a very large VITA, well, hundreds of volunteers, and she just said, where do I refer people? I've got clients. Everybody talks about their taxes around tax season because of the refund. And she's in the housing unit. So she says, when my clients can't get RAFed, when my clients are being evicted, they rely on that tax refund. And that's just when you're in crisis. Other families are budgeting their yearly budget for that tax refund. Can you go next slide, please? Okay, just to, I think everyone knows immigrants work, right? I think people come to this country because they want to work and they are filling our labor needs. There hasn't been immigration reform since 1986, when they really short-sightedly decided not to plan for future labor needs. And guess what? We had future labor needs since 1986. And because of restrictions over the years, making it harder and harder and harder to get a Social Security number, you've got a majority of undocumented people living in mixed status households. So some have Social Security numbers and some don't. A lot of them have US citizen kids. The earned income tax credit is the biggest income support for working families with children. It dwarfs almost all other supports. And we're taking a sector of our workers and not allowing them to access it because of their tax identifying number. Now, 10 states have changed it. I think it's time for us. Go to the next slide. Like Charlotte said, the IRS has become the largest anti-poverty benefits administrator for working families. The working families understand this. Sometimes, our legislators and advocates don't necessarily understand how important the tax system is. And even if they do understand that, they don't understand how mixed status households are affected and completely shut out of the biggest tax credit there is. Next slide. There was a recent study about how much tax contributions the undocumented make. And in Massachusetts, it's about $650 million. And Mass Budget has a report that they call, the title is, Ending the Tax Penalty Against Immigrant Workers, and estimate that it would cost Massachusetts between $22.5 to $28 million to extend our EITC to ITIN filers. Now, that's not just a refund. When someone gets the EITC, studies show it goes right back into the community, it goes right back into small business. It has long-term effects, even in terms of future earning capacity of children. I mean, there's a lot of work. It's an old credit. It's been around for 50 years. Next slide. And we would help over 20,000 households who are currently missing out on this credit. So what's the result of not giving it to them? They are further impoverished. They become more likely to be in the shadow economy. That doesn't help any of us. And 10 states have done it. There has been this trend to extend certain benefits to undocumented, longstanding residents of our states, because it's this recognition that they really are critical members of our communities and our economies. There's a book written a few years ago by a scholar called Americans in Waiting, which talks about the change, this shift that we had for so long of looking at immigrants as an immigration as a transitional period, that people are on the path to citizenship. And we've had this kind of paradigm shift lately, which is not helping anybody. I mean, my dad came to this country thinking he was going to stay 5 years tops and go back home, and he died here at 94. So people come, they work, they have families, they open businesses, the vast majority of immigrants are working age. They subsidize our Social Security without necessarily any hope of recouping those costs. So I think the least we could do is to give them the tax credits they have earned. Is that my last slide? No, we can do better. And become that 11th state.
Thank you, Angela. Appreciate all you're doing. And Angela's just such a huge advocate for immigrant families and for this policy. We can stop sharing our slides now. That's it for our content and presentations. But before we open it up for Q&A, we want to pass it on to two more legislative champions who have just really advocated for these policies, for tax credits, for strengthening them for years, and for families and children in ways beyond that. So I'd love to welcome Representative Decker to join us. Again, has been a huge champion for these policies, leads our bills, and really appreciate all of the work that she's doing.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Just want to say thank you to all of you who continue to do this work along with Rep. Vargas and Senator DiDomenico. Angela, I think I just came into the middle when you were talking about, I'm assuming you were talking about the ITNs. And,
Yes.
I think about, my father-in-law who has passed away, came to this country, looking for safety for his children. And the plan was to always go back. But he was an entrepreneur. He came here, he started businesses, he employed people, he gave to this economy, and he was going to go back. And unfortunately, he also passed away before he could fulfill that dream. And what we know, and all of you are on this call because you already know this, what we know is that the EITC, the Earned Income Tax Credit, it makes a difference for people, right? My own mom is like able to get this. And it acknowledges that people work hard, and working hard in this country doesn't mean that you actually can still meet your basic needs. Never mind thrive, right? You can still barely survive. And the idea that we are excluding anyone who is here working legally, contributing to our tax system, and not allowing them to actually benefit from the EITC, the argument we're going to hear people make is what it would add to the budget. It doesn't matter. They're already supposed to be included. They're doing the work. They are just somewhere on the continuum of where they will be on the citizenship path, which we know is a long and arduous path for many people. There is no rational, good reason to exclude them. And what we also know from a lot of the research that's been happening over the years, well, both through what happened in the COVID, when we saw what happened when we increased benefits in a variety of ways to people, but also for communities like mine and others that have done the guaranteed income, what we know is that when people actually have more cash, when they have the ability to actually make decisions for their family, that they are the experts on how to spend money and resources to meet their family needs. What we know is that, in fact, they cost less money in the long run to the state government. It is the most fiscally responsible thing to do, is to continue to make sure that everybody who's eligible for an earned income tax credit gets it. And also that the people who are the most economically vulnerable, when we stabilize those families, we know that in the long run, they actually need less government and give more back. So this is an argument that, continues to just make good financial sense and fiscal sense. And I'm just grateful to be part of a community of folks. And I want to remind people that our advocacy and our work matters. When Children's Health Watch first approached me 12 years ago and asked if I would be interested in filing the EITC, Massachusetts was at 15%. They asked me to file a bill at 30%. And I said, well, what's the highest? And we learned that a couple of places had 50%. And so we've gone from 15 to 23 to 30 to 40 in the last tax bill. We have also become the only state in the nation, and now somebody can tell me if others have followed suit, but so for the last I checked, we were also able to take a provision of that bill that I was able to slip into a supplemental budget. And if you are married and you flee your batterer, you can still file separately, even though prior to this, you had to file jointly with your batterer. So many people who left violent, abusive relationships did not benefit from the Earned Income Tax Credit. And in Massachusetts, we were the first state to allow that to happen. So I just know that our advocacy together, it matters and it's working. It makes a difference. So I am just fired up to be in community with all of you, and we're going to keep going because when we keep going, we know what happens is that the outcomes that we want actually matter, and people's lives have, we're giving people more tools to build resiliency. So thank you. And I see that my high school classmate Sal's on. I have to jump off because like all of you, we're like juggling way too many things, but this is a really important policy area because we can see the direct correlation to how it changes people's lives. So let's just keep on going.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Representative. Appreciate it, and appreciate you grounding us in all of the wins that we have had. We know that this policy works, and we know that there's broad support for it. So thank you for all you're doing, and would love to, yes, pass it on to Senator DiDomenico, who has been another steadfast champion for these tax credits. Appreciate you for joining us.
Thank you. And thanks for all your work, Charlotte. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody, and thanks for having me and juggling things around, trying to do 10 things at once, as Representative Decker just said. I'm happy to be here with my good friend and classmate. She is a year younger than me. She does point that out all the time, so I will point that out as well. But also great to be here with my colleague, Senator Eldridge, and my good friend, Representative Vargas as well. So Marjorie does a great job of explaining why this is so important and why we have to get this done and why we can't afford to wait any longer, because people are depending on us to take action with this and try to make sure that we expand the ITC to I-10 members as well, filers. So it is important for me, particularly representing communities like Everett and Chelsea, and seeing the working class folks who are struggling every day, going to work, doing the right thing. They're doing exactly what we ask them to do. Go to work and pay taxes and actually supporting their families, and don't even qualify for many public benefits that we have to offer the wider scope of society. So it is equal, so important that we recognize and debunk the narrative that immigrants are not paying taxes and pulling their weight. Actually, they're doing more than pulling their weight, and they're doing more than some folks who are citizens, quite frankly, are doing. So it is important that we recognize that and take action. Every 2 years we make these speeches. Every 2 years we talk about how we want to support members of our communities and support immigrants and support people who are in our cities and towns doing the right thing. And quite frankly, sometimes we talk a good game. We talk about it, but we don't actually act on policies that we know will help people and that we know are meant to create an equal playing field and bring more equity into our communities. So this is a very simple thing. It doesn't cost a lot of money. I know, and people talk about and fiscally responsible. And I heard Representative Decker talk about how we flip the narrative on this, and this is fiscally responsible. This is something that we should be doing, and it's a benefit all the way through for a simple policy change and a simple thing that we can do right now to make a big difference in people's lives. So it is important that we stay focused and don't listen to the narrative that's going on at the national level that is meant to distract us and take us away from the mission of what we're trying to do individually in our own states. And we as a state can do more to help our immigrants in the face of what's happening at the federal level, where there's an assault on immigrants and there's an assault on people who need our help in more vulnerable populations as well. So if we are serious about doing something, this is a timely and an important issue to get done this session and get this done now, is to help the people that we say we want to help. So I appreciate all the organizers for being here. I see a lot of good friends here who are working in the trenches. We make speeches, you do all the work. And I appreciate all the work that you do every single day to help the people that we all care about. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate that. So we're going to put up on the screen here. Thank you all for being here again today. We're going to open up for some Q&A. If there are any, feel free to come off mute or put in the chat. But again, just to summarize, I know we've talked a lot about what tax credits mean in terms of cash in pockets, what VITA does to help families access free tax prep resources, and then this priority around expanding access to the earned income tax credit to these immigrant workers who are excluded. So we're going to keep these points up on the screen. We're really hoping that you and your office can prioritize prioritize these in your budget meetings. Again, these are our 2 budget priorities, and so we were really appreciative of you joining. And if there are any questions, please feel free to raise your hand, go off mute, put in chat, anything that works for you.
Quick question for Angela. What are the other 10 states that have expanded EITC?
Oh, you're gonna make me look that up. They're around us, so we've got Maryland, we've got Vermont, we've got Colorado. Who else is there?
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and we're behind. We're behind the trend. And DC.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just a way that Massachusetts can keep up with many of our other states as well.
Right.
Thank you for the question. And thanks, Chelsea.
I think California, Colorado, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, New Mexico, Oregon, Vermont, Washington, and DC. They're there.
Any other questions for our speakers this morning? Okay. Well,
I want to
yes.
I want to add very quickly that when Angela mentioned the accuracy rate in filing returns, VITA historically has had between 96 and 97% accuracy rate when it does tax returns. And that's because these are volunteers who are trained and certified by the IRS itself. And also we have some help from the DOR with the training, but where we really need the help is with the funding.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I know Joe spoke at the top, but really highlighting the impact that VITA has in terms of delivering those credits to families, and the cuts that we've seen over the past couple of years, and the further cut that the governor proposed in her budget, unfortunately, just would completely limit the ability to provide free tax prep resources.
Right.
And they never
So,
satisfied the need anyway, right? It was
Right.
never enough. But you try to expand it as not reduce it. I mean, I don't know all that much about exactly like what's possible in the budget, but that just seems like small money for such a big return. And when I've talked to people at the State House, they don't necessarily understand that VITA actually needs funds to function. And but I've had people complain, oh, you can't get an appointment. They fill up as soon as tax season opens. They're all full. And it's because you have a capacity issue. We could be doing a lot more to expand awareness of what VITA is. The IRS sponsors it for a reason, but it's not enough. It just doesn't satisfy it because we've got too many people who need these services and can't afford or fall into paying too much to get those refunds, and they're critical. We've got a new tax credit. It's small, it's not big, $440, but it's something that even the poorest families can get for their kids who are under 13. But are you going to spend $300 to get a $440 credit? If you're, it doesn't make sense. We really need to expand it more. I wish more people could understood. But for another day, the people on this call too, I would hope that you have in mind that civics education and financial literacy and tax literacy are important to everybody. because you can't complain about what you're missing if you don't know what you're missing. And then your communities are the ones who end up losing out, because those tax credits go right back into the local economy.
I would just add a little bit, and I think it's really important to understand how VitaSites work, and we can have another briefing on some of the details. But it's absolutely true that as resources are reduced, the capacity of VitaSites, which require coordination and space and computers as well, that capacity to bring on and retain volunteers is limited. And so the frustration that people have because they can't get an appointment is I think it's directly related to the limited resources. Angela, you mentioned some of the activities that we actually had begun doing, and that is expanding financial education, but also staying open longer, starting earlier, and then staying open past the tax season. Was something that we were involved with expanding, but that has to be sort of tailored a little bit and held back. There are also partnerships, sort of new partnerships that are growing, but may not be able to grow quickly enough with hospitals. Corbina, who's on the line, was with colleagues to do taxes at one of the local hospitals for an event, and those kinds of partnerships are so critical. Also, outreach. Outreach is so important, and we would be in a position to work with more and more partners to enhance outreach. So it's all of a piece, and I think you're absolutely right that what is not as well known is the fact that IRS volunteers are IRS certified, and the accuracy is, if you will use a baseball analogy, league leading, and so important.
Thank you, Joe. And if there are no more questions, thank you all for joining us. We're going to pass around the recording to everyone who registered, as well as these slide decks and our budget fact sheets. I appreciate you all taking time out of your busy day. We'll stay on for maybe another minute or two in case anybody's a little nervous to come off mute, but appreciate you all for sticking around, and thanks for all you're doing, and have a great rest of your day. All right. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Angela. Gonna close
Thank
this out.
you.
Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care.